Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast where you'll hear conversations with academic librarians, technologists, researchers, and authors whose work is laying the foundation for higher education's future. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this four-part series, we're going to get an inside peek at a publishing operation tasked with distributing arguably some of the most important research, data, and reports available. I'll be speaking with some of the team behind UN Publications, the publishing and distribution unit of the United Nations. UN Publications curates the UN system's global research provided by dozens of UN agencies, funds, programs, and departments. These reports are made available through UN Publications' iLibrary platform, and we'll get a look under the hood to see how the metadata, structured taxonomies, and subject tagging work to surface this vast array of content. We'll also hear about UN Publications' global publishing partnerships, including the SDG Publishers Compact, the SDG Book Club, and how academic libraries can join the UN's network of partners to align themselves more closely to the Sustainable Development Goals. Joining me for this series, which is brought to you with support from UN Publications, are Mary Glenn, Chief of UN Publications, Shalou Thomas-Cherian, Senior Program Manager, Stephen McGroarty, Editorial Manager, and Antje Waterman, who is the Marketing Manager. Throughout the series, each of our guests will provide an inside track on UN Publications operation, products, and partnerships. In this final episode of our four-part series, Antje Waterman, UN Publications Marketing Manager, joins us to explain the UN's SDGs in greater detail and how the Publishers Compact was set up to support them. Antje will also talk about how UN Publications content is used by more than policymakers and corporate entities, and how librarians can themselves become part of the UN's global network to support the SDGs. All right, Antje, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Bill.
All right. So in every episode so far, we've been asking your colleagues if they could just introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their role at UN Publications. So we'll do the same with you.
Great. Yeah. So as you said, my name is Antje Waterman. I'm the marketing manager at UN Publications, and I help with conceptualizing and executing the overall marketing strategy. And I actually started out at one of the so-called author departments. So my career at the UN began at UNDP, the development program, and I supported the negotiation process of the SDGs that we have talked about quite a bit now on the communication side. That was for a couple of years. And then I switched over to the UN Secretariat, where I'm now in UN Publications in the Department of Global Communications.
Oh, excellent. So you have like an inside track on both sides of the equation there for the content that comes into UN Publications.
Yeah, it's definitely great if you have the perspective, having worked at an organization that has a really great field presence like UNDP with a lot of regional offices and country offices, very different from the UN Secretariat life.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So we've mentioned the SDGs a few times now in our conversations. I'm wondering if you could talk about those in a little bit more detail, and particularly the SDGs Publishers Compact.
Yes. So in 2015, the UN member states came together in New York and adopted the so-called 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And at its core are the, as we call them, 17 SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. Sometimes we also call them global goals. And these goals, as my colleagues have mentioned already, they really range from ending poverty to ensuring a quality education for every child, all the way up to climate action. But what's really special about these goals is that they're all interconnected. So you don't just pick and choose one or two that you like. You really have to see them as a whole system. So one example I like to give is getting quality education for children. So of course, you can build a school, you have a building that children can go to, but that's just not enough for quality education. You need teachers that actually show up every day for the children. Outside the school, the children will need nutritious food and clean water. If they're hungry, they cannot concentrate. If they drink dirty water, they get sick. And then also it's the aspect that's actually very, very big at the UN. It's safe roads. How can they get to school safely, while they walk next to a lot of traffic? So this example, I think, really showcases the interconnectedness of these different goals and how they work together. And as the name already gives away, the 2030 agenda is supposed to be achieved by 2030. And as Shalo had already mentioned too, this really takes a lot, not just the member states, as in the governments, but also non-state actors like NGOs, the private sector, but also publishers and libraries and people like you and me to help with this agenda. And of course, we want to also see how we are doing. It's a really long time frame, 15 years. So of course, this whole agenda has a ton of targets and indicators that are measuring progress. So every year, member states come together and tell us what they have been doing in their particular country to move towards achieving these sustainable development goals. And just last month in September, the UN hosted a really big SDG summit here in New York, which was the midpoint of these goals. And the Secretary General issued an urgent call to action because, particularly due to COVID, a lot of these goals are really off track to be met by 2030. And this is where we come in with the SDG Publishers Compact. So UN Publications, together with the International Publishers Association, founded the compact in 2020. And this was really meant to engage with the publishing community because we already knew they were doing lots of different projects on climate action, looking at their own businesses. And we really wanted to engage with them closely. So our approach for the compact is twofold. So on the one hand, we really encourage them to publish more books related to the Sustainable Development Goals. One example we have is we really saw an uptick in the publication of children's books related to climate change and climate action. So this really shows there's a huge demand by children, by parents, by educators. How can we break down these really big and sometimes scary topics for children? And then how we engage with them, we can show them solutions, we can show them how they can take action on these things. And then on the other hand, of course, we encourage them to look at their own business practices. How are they doing? How they're printing their books? What kind of paper are they using? But then also looking at innovative ways, for example, printing on demand. Lots of different projects that they can do. And overall, we have 10 concrete actions that the publishers commit to when they become a member of the Publishers Compact. And of course, here as well, we want to see how everyone is doing. And every year we ask them to fill out a form online on each of these different concrete actions. So that way, from year to year, we can see how the progress is between the members. And of course, we also use these results to encourage them or to get new ideas on what they could implement in their company that they might have not thought about before. And just to be clear, this compact is not only for publishers, so we also invite printers, booksellers, and libraries to join.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I know that some of the larger scientific publishers that have signed on to the Publishers Compact. I mean, they're literally sort of reorganizing the sort of presentation of their content that they have available around the SDGs.
Yep.
Which is kind of neat to see. So a lot of this content is aimed at policymakers and businesses that need this kind of research to develop policy and remain compliant with SDG related regulations. But I'm curious, how does this also trickle down to the higher education market? Can you talk about how this content is being integrated into instruction and used in research applications?
Yes, so UN Publications has several ways in how we interact with the higher education sector. So one of them is definitely also, as you just mentioned, the SDG Publishers Compact. So the academic libraries are one of the most active member group of this compact. So we have seen that they're already tagging their research for SDGs. They are organizing a lot of their own webinars and meetups to exchange best practices. So this goes really well with our work at the SDG Publishers Compact. So we also host events where they're invited to bring the community together. And then also we have seen that a lot of ministries of education already mandating the SDGs being part of the educational programs, and the same for the educational publishing programs as well. Earlier, the other big piece, of course, that we use is the UNI library. It's a really great tool for researchers, for students and professors alike. So this is really one way of showcasing our content. Stephen and Shalo have talked about how the content can be sorted by SDG or also researchers can use our collections that we put together. So this really serves as an entryway to the wide variety of research that we have and that we hope that they are using. And the UNI library can be trialed as well. So if there is an academic library that would like to test it out, we are happy to provide access for an extended period of time. And that way they can either ingest it into their system or, again, have their students and users use the platform from wherever they are to test out our content. And then last but not least, we also participate in a lot of academic conferences. We receive a lot of feedback from students from all around the world, how they're using our platform, but also particularly there's a lot of interest in the data sets and the Comtrade platform that Stephen had mentioned before.
So just curious, do you also attend the ALA's annual conference and ACRL's conference every other year?
Yes, we do. I think you have to swing back to Mary to get more information on that.
Good. That's excellent. So what are some of the other ways your division is working with global publishers to promote and support the SDGs?
Yeah, one of our other initiatives that we launched, that's actually our all-time favorite in 2019, is the so-called SDG Book Club. So this is a book club for children. So that has been really fun to work on. It aims at children 6 to 12 and encourages them to interact with the principles of the Sustainable Development Goals, how we describe it on the website. So what does it really mean? We have curated reading lists of books from around the world in the 6 official languages of the UN. And I'm just going to repeat them again: Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. And then obviously for each of the 17 SDGs. So yeah, you can do the math. It's a lot of books. It was a huge undertaking that took us several years. And that's why also we work very closely with our partners for this project. So with the IPA, again, the International Publisher Association, we work with IFLA, EIBF, with the Bologna Children's Book Fair, and with EB. So they really supported this big endeavor to get the publishers on board, to have librarians suggest books to us that we would consider for the list. And then we also created a so-called selection committee that was reviewing all these books to make a final selection for the website. And so the idea here is to inspire children to start thinking about solutions as well. So if, again, I mentioned it earlier, when you take climate action, like climate change can be very scary. It's a very big problem, a very big topic. And then, so we were really looking for books that offer solutions that they can apply in their community. So together with their parents or with their educators, they could go out and do something on that day, and they wouldn't need to wait for governments to come up with a solution to the problem. And again, so we sit in New York City, we came up with this SDG book club, but then we really needed the schools, we needed libraries, we needed educators and parents to kind of like bring the books to the children. Because of course, we don't expect them to go to the UN website and find the reading lists. So with the help of all these different groups, we were able to organize different story times. We had discussions for these different books or readathons. And before COVID, we actually also managed to have a couple of story times in our very own bookshop. So UN Publications is also running the UN Bookshop, where we sell the SDG pin, as Mary had mentioned earlier. And of course, being also next to all the different missions, we had ambassadors come and read the books to children, which was really great. So they brought in their own perspective from their own country. And one very successful story time we had was for SDG 2, for Zero Hunger, where we read the book Maddie's Fridge. So all these books we had were a lot about children being at school, noticing that one of their friends would not have lunch and would be hungry. And it was very, very interesting how all the kids that were at the story time, they could relate. They told us their own stories, how they shared food with a friend and why it's important to eat, which really showed us, again, something that we know, but it was just great to get the confirmation. They understand the problem. They know why it's important. And they also have a solution to it. So many of us told us, yeah, I shared my lunch with my friend so he wouldn't be hungry because he forgot his lunch that day. And because it's a really fun project, a lot of positive feedback, we now expanded it. So we often have libraries reach out to us or other groups. And we now have a chapter that goes across Africa in several different languages. We have Brazil, Germany, Indonesia, the Netherlands, Norway, and Portugal. And they're all showcasing their own book selection with a regional aspect to it, which is really great.
Excellent. Yeah. So, libraries can also become part of a global network to align themselves more closely with the SDGs. How do you make that happen?
Yeah, no question. Libraries are a great vehicle to spread the word of the SDGs. And in that case, obviously, any library, like the public library that hosts the story time for children, but also the academic ones, because that's really the beauty of it. They cover all levels of education, they cover all age ranges. And so, of course, they have the power to acquire books on the topics of the SDGs. So if you go to the library, they can, for example, also set up a certain area where they curate SDG related books. They can do something similar on their website. And also they're hosting, now that we are recovering from COVID, a lot of in-person events. So they can do the story times, they can invite the authors, and they really bring the community together. Because again, being in New York, we can give some ideas and guidance and inspiration, but then it really takes the on-the-ground libraries and the communities to implement a lot of these ideas. And so, of course, we would love to see also more libraries sign up for the SDG Publishers Compact. And in the past as well, they can reach out anytime. We are happy to help on how to set up story times. I know we might have to change that a bit for the academic audience and maybe find some adult books on the SDGs, but we know there are plenty as well. We've often received the request to also come up with an SDG book club for adults. So that might be something in the future for us. And we're going to provide the links to both the SDG book club and the Publishers Compact in the show notes as well.
Perfect. All right. So excellent. That's all the time we have. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the program. You just heard from Antje Waterman, UN Publications Marketing Manager. As always, underwriting of opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant, Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.